Should I go inside?
It all burned down in 1970. This is where the guards had their social hall. So during the federal years, you lived out here with your husband, a guard on Alcatraz. You had a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner, you would hold it here. This is a large social hall. They had prom parties for the children that lived on Alcatraz as well. The girls really liked that. And they had a bowling alley and an ice cream parlor for the kids as well. Yeah, so this is actually a beautiful building. Unfortunately, it burned down in 1970, and there was a period where a lot of vandalism was occurring on Alcatraz. So after the prison closed in 1963, came a national park about 10 years later in 1973. So for about 10 years, nobody really lived out here. There was one man in charge of the island. Now, the island was still federal property, but it was surplus. That meant that they were trying to sell it. They did not know what to do with it. It wasn't a prison anymore. And some ideas, for example, a millionaire wanted to buy it and make it into a shopping mall. Another person wanted to buy Alcatraz and make it into a hotel, spa, resort kind of thing. And then another person wanted to make a casino on Alcatraz. Now, the Native Americans, they wanted to purchase the island, and they wanted to build housing, a university, a cultural center, and also a hospital. Because in those years, they were actually being kicked out of their Indian reservations, and they were promised a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity in San Francisco and along Oakland as well. Well, that was all a lie. In fact, a lot of them became homeless. They did not have the proper education for those jobs that they were promised, and they were really discriminated in those years as well. So that's why they wanted to purchase Alcatraz. Now in the 1800s, there was a treaty that said if you were a male Sioux Indian and you were at the age of 18 and you never lived in an Indian reservation, you could buy government surplus property. Alcatraz was government surplus property. That's why they wanted to buy it. Unfortunately, other people were also occupying it at the same time. Towards the end of the Indian occupation, biker gangs were out here as well. The Hells Angels, they were actually making drugs out here on Alcatraz and dealing them. Also, a lot of drunks were out here, a lot of prostitutes. It was used like an abandoned warehouse. It was just an abandoned island. So lots of different individuals were out here. That's when 4 buildings burned down, including this one. This one, the warden's house. Over when you get to the cell house, you'll see the lighthouse as well. Underneath the lighthouse, there was another building. That one burned down. And right where the restroom is up above was another house. That's where the surgeon used to live. It was a large Victorian building. So 4 buildings burned down, and we don't know who did it. We just know that it was most likely arson because it did happen on the same night where all these 4 buildings burned down. So on purpose, but we don't know who actually started the fires. A lot of people that were supporting the Indian occupation from San Francisco and Sausalito saw these 4 buildings burn down. They immediately assumed that the Indians were the ones who burned the buildings down. And so that's when fewer and fewer people were bringing them food and supplies by boat. So the Indians were forced off of the island. Fortunately, they were able to gain a lot of rights that they never had before, but unfortunately, they could not keep Alcatraz. Because you need a boat to get food, water, and supplies. And then sewage was another big issue out here as well. So you'll see some Indian graffiti like over on the water tower up above. You probably noticed down below when you got off of the boats as well. So you'll notice some of that throughout the island. Now, when this was a military prison, those military men, prisoners, they made their own prisons throughout the island. If you look at that building, it's called the Electric Shock. That's very similar to one of the prisons that they built out here. And they made several of those buildings because they had such a large number of prisoners out here. Eventually, one of those buildings caught on fire one night. The prisoners were fine. None of them were hurt. But that's when the military, who was still in charge of the island, decided for those military prisoners to make the cell house. So that cell house that you'll do your audio tour, that was made by military prisoners, and then they were eventually housed inside of them as well. And it was completed in 1912. So last year it turned 100 years old. That's why it looks in such bad shape. But when you get your audio tour, you'll eventually go up this hill, zigzag a couple of times. You'll see the prison at the top, and that's where you'll get the audio tour. But they eventually made the cell house. The prison, the military prison, eventually ran out of money. So then they sold the island to become a federal prison island in 1933. The first prisoners were brought out here, federal prisoners were brought out here a year later in 1934. The reason why they brought them a year later was because they had to change a couple of things out here. Now, during the military prison years, the island was minimal security. It was easier to escape from. During the federal years, it was maximum security. So they had to put barbed wire fencing, not just on the fences and the gates around the island. They even put barbed wire fencing along the cliffs. So if you try to jump off a cliff, you might eventually get caught in barbed wire fencing along the cliff perimeter. Also, they added more of those guard towers, and they changed the cell house. When you do your audio tour, you'll start in an area called AB block. You'll notice that on the, I believe it's on your left side, you'll notice that the bars of the cells are flat. But most of the bars throughout the cell house are round. The reason was when this was a military prison, all of the cell bars were flat. It was cheap metal. If you had a federal prisoner out here on a flat barred cell, all he needed was some floss, some toothpaste, baking soda, and soap, and he could use that to saw through those flat bar cells. That's why they changed them to the round bars. They're reinforced steel, they're tool-proof, and very hard to escape from. Plus, the doors slide open. They do not swing open. If you have a door that would swing open, first of all, you need a key. The guards down below with the prisoners in the cell house never carried keys. In fact, they never even carried guns. Only the guards in the gun gallery. So you'll notice that when you do your audio tour. So, have you seen the movie Escape from Alcatraz with Clint Eastwood? Yeah? Okay. Those three men, they managed to climb down this hill, and they escaped from the other side of the officers' club. Right over there, you'll see a green area. From there, we don't know what happened to those three men. Right now, if they were alive, they would be in their 80s. Frank Morris, who Clint Eastwood played, would be around 85 years old. And the England brothers, John England and Clarence England, they would be 81 and 82. And there's actually a U.S. Marshal who's still in charge of the case.
Jeez.
He wants to find them and capture them eventually. The dummy heads in the cell house, those are not the original ones. The original ones are with the FBI. They're considered evidence. But you'll see their cells when you do your audio tour. So we're going to go up this road. You'll see a street sign all the way at the top. And we're going to talk more about the work that they did here during the federal years.